Leah! More wine. Try not to drop it this time, little dud.
18 years. I carried their food, I swallowed their contempt, and I smiled.
The Primal Champion trials begin at dawn. Every pack sends their strongest. What is that scent?
I felt his eyes find me before I dared to look up. He was finding me. Through every layer of the lie I'd wrapped around, like a hand closing around my throat, but gentle, like he already knew. They never gave me a door, so I built one out of lies and leather and borrowed time. My name is Leah. No pack, no past, just this moment. They said the stone hearts were made of iron, hard, unbreakable, built to last forever. In a pack of iron, I was the only scrap of gold, and my brothers spent 18 years trying to melt me down. They had no idea what I was becoming, alone, in the dark. Called me a dud, wolfless, weak.
Prologue. They say the stone hearts are made of iron, iron in their spines, iron in their fists, iron in the way they laugh, loud and hard, and like nothing in this world could ever actually hurt them. My father built 6 sons who could crack stone with their bare hands. 6 sons the pack pointed to with their chests out, saying, "Now that is what a wolf looks like." He also made me. I am Leah Stoneheart, and in a pack of iron, I was the only scrap of gold. My brothers spent 18 years trying to melt me down. They almost did. Byron called me the dud from the time I was 8. The pack whispered it behind my back. The alpha's daughter, the one the moon forgot. What none of them knew was that I had shifted 3 years ago, alone in the dark forest. My wolf was small, quiet, fast as a winter wind through bare branches. I never told anyone, because the moment my father found out, I would stop being a person and become a transaction. So I stayed invisible. I trained in secret before dawn. I waited. Then the decree arrived. Alpha King Arik Dawncrest was hosting the Primal Champion trials. The winner would receive sovereign's immunity, the right to leave their pack forever, free. My father announced it at dinner with his hand on Byron's shoulder. His eyes never once found me in the doorway. That night I picked up the shears. My name would be Leon. No pack, no past. Just a wolf who had decided that if she couldn't make them see her as a daughter, she would make the entire realm see her as a warrior. Chapter 1. The Iron Mask. I did it on a Tuesday, which felt wrong for something so irreversible. Tuesday was laundry day, the day I bleached the training whites and relaced Byron's boots and pretended the bruise he'd left on my wrist from yesterday's shove was nothing. Tuesday was not the day you decided to become someone else. And yet, I waited until the hall was breathing the slow, heavy rhythm of deep sleep, past midnight, closer to 2, before I moved. I had been lying on my pallet fully dressed for 3 hours, running through the plan the way I ran through forest trails, methodically until every root and stone was memorized, and there was no such thing as a surprise. Remington's room was first. He was the second youngest, which meant he was careless enough to leave his door unlatched and stupid enough to keep his spare gear in a trunk at the foot of his bed. I was across the threshold and crouched at his trunk before my heartbeat had time to spike. The leather training wrap was on top, dark, worn soft, sized for someone twice my width. I took it. I took the arm bracers too. Remington would assume he'd lost them in the wash. Remington assumed everything bad that happened to him was someone else's fault. Miller's room was harder. Miller Lucas, my brother by pack law if not by blood, slept light and mean, the way people do, who grew up unsure whether they were safe. He had a gift for finding the cruelest version of a truth and delivering it with a pleasant smile, like he was doing you a favor. His boots were under his bed. I got down on my stomach and reached for them in the dark, fingers walking across cold stone, and I was almost out, when his breathing changed. I went completely still. 5 seconds. 10. I held the boots against my chest and did not breathe and thought with tremendous calm that if he woke and found me, I was going to have to run anyway, just without a plan. He rolled over. His breathing deepened. I was out of the room in 4 seconds, and didn't let myself feel the relief until I was in the cold washroom with the door bolted behind me. Then my hands started shaking. I let them. 60 seconds. That was all I allowed. Then I stood and looked at myself in the cracked mirror above the basin. The girl with her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubbornness, and 18 years of being looked through written into the set of her jaw. I picked up the kitchen shears. I cut to the chin, fast, before she could talk me out of it. The hair hit the floor in one long wave, and I did not look at it. I bound what remained under dark linen, wrapped Remington's leather brace around my chest until breathing required concentration, pulled Miller's loose tunic over it, then the worn leathers, then the bracers. I widened my stance the way I had watched my brothers stand 10,000 times. Weight forward, space claiming, like the ground beneath you owes you something. Leon looked back from the mirror, not Leah, not the ghost, and someone with nothing to lose because she had already lost everything that mattered and survived it anyway. I left before dawn with a stolen sword and a name I'd practiced until it felt like mine. I did not look back at the hall. I knew if I did, I'd see it the way I always had, as a place I had failed to belong to, and I couldn't carry that weight, not today. Today, for the first time in 18 years, I ran towards something instead of away. Chapter 2. The Predator's Gaze. The forest run was exactly what it sounded like, which was the cruelest kind of trial. No mystery, no hidden advantage. Just your body against 50 miles of dark woodland and whatever was hunting you inside it. They released us at dawn, 200 competitors bleeding out of the gate in a thunder of boots and barely leashed wolf energy. I let them go. I dropped into the eastern tree line and took the route I had studied on the posted map for 4 hours the night before. Not the fastest path, the smartest one. For the first 2 hours, I felt almost functional. My wolf moved beneath my skin like a current, not pushing to surface, just present, alert. I tracked by sound as much as sight, cutting wide when the smell of aggression got too thick. I was crossing the stream at the valley's base, boots in hand, our water numbing my feet to the ankle, when the forest went quiet, not gradually. Everything stopped, all at once, like the world itself had been told to hold its breath. I turned. He was on the opposite bank, 20 feet upstream, watching me with those gold eyes that didn't belong in a human face. Leather trousers, nothing else. His ritual-scarred chest rising and falling with the calm of someone who had never once needed to run from anything. He stood the way power stands, like the space around him was on loan. I did not move. Running would tell him everything. You're off the marked path, Leon. He knew my name. That meant he'd checked the registration rolls. That meant I had been on his mind before he found me here, which was somehow worse than being caught. Faster this way, I said, keeping my voice in its lower register. Holding his gaze the way my wolf told me to, not submissive, not challenging, neutral, a wolf who belonged exactly where they were. He tilted his head, unhurried, deeply animal. His nostrils moved just barely, and I watched something shift behind the gold of his eyes, like a fire adjusting its shape. You smell different out here, he said, not suspicious, almost wondering, like a man who keeps finding a word on the tip of his tongue and cannot place it. I told myself to answer. My mouth had other plans. In the silence, the ribbon slipped. It had been tucked under the linen at my hairline, a small dark red thing, the one piece of Leah that had made it into Leon's disguise because I was sentimental in ways I couldn't afford. It came loose, drifted down through the cold air between us, and landed in the shallow water at my feet. I was moving before it touched the surface, boots over my shoulder, bare feet hitting the far bank, body threading into the undergrowth with every ounce of speed I had spent 3 years building in the dark. I ran until my lungs were on fire and my feet were bleeding from the roots and stones, and it didn't matter because there was nothing behind me. No footsteps, no pursuit. Either he'd let me go or he was something quieter than anything I knew how to listen for. I told myself it was the first one. I crossed the finish marker with 12 minutes to spare and did not let myself think about him crouching to pick up the ribbon, about the way his expression had looked in that last second before I bolted. Not angry, not suspicious, patient, like a man who had confirmed something he already knew and was willing to wait. Chapter 3. The Sifting. By the third day of the mid-tier trials, I understood what the sifting actually meant. It wasn't the tasks that separated competitors. It was what you did between them. The morning trial was a cliff traverse, a quarter-mile of exposed rock face with handholds barely wider than 2 fingers. Northeast wind designed to make you reconsider every decision that had brought you to this ledge. The drop was not lethal. About 40 feet to rocky slope and unpleasant scrub. Enough to end a competitor, enough to break things. I was 3/4 across when I heard it, not a scream, more like a word that had lost its courage halfway out. It came from below and to the left, and I made the mistake of looking. A boy, 18, our slight in the way that means fast rather than weak, was hanging by one hand from a jutting rock 6 feet below the traverse line. His shoulder was at an angle that told me everything. His free hand scrabbled at rock with decreasing conviction. His fingers were bleeding. Hadley Klein, I had noticed him at registration. Not because he stood out, but because he didn't. And I had a talent for recognizing that particular kind of invisibility. He'd signed in alone. He kept his eyes down the same careful way I kept mine, which meant he'd learned that habit the same way I had. 17 competitors ahead, 11 behind. Every one of them kept moving. I have thought many times since about what it says about a person. What they do in helping costs them something real, not hypothetical. And when the price is time and placement and the slim margin between winning and going home, I had already turned back before I finished the thought. I got down to him, back 8 feet diagonal line across the rock, and got my shoulder under his free arm before his grip gave entirely. For a moment we were both pressed against cold stone, with 40 feet of consequence below us, and the muffled indifference of everyone who had already passed. "I've got you. Your left shoulder's out. Don't use it. There's a ledge 12 inches above your right foot. Find it with your toe, not your eye." He found it. We moved up together until we were back on the traverse line, wind battering at us like it had taken this personally. He looked at me, green eyes, dark circles, a cut across his chin from the fall. Something in his face cracked, as the way faces do when they have braced for the worst and receive something else instead. "You lost your placement," he said. "I know," I said. "Why?" The truth was, because I have been left before, and I know what it costs, and I would rather lose a placement than carry that knowledge of myself. But Leon wouldn't say that. "Because you're faster than your shoulder makes you look," I said instead. Practical. True enough. He almost laughed, strained through the pain, but real. We came in 14th. Barely enough. The trial officials recorded it with the blankness of men noting data, not watching stories, but someone else was watching. I felt it before I looked, that pressure behind my sternum, that sense of being found. I kept my eyes forward and walked past the Royal Observation Post without turning. Eden felt those gold eyes follow me all the way to the competitor's tent. I had done the one thing iron cannot do. I had bent without breaking. In a competition built on the premise that strength means taking, I had given. And I was still standing. Something about that, I sensed with a cold certainty I didn't want to examine, had made the Alpha King look at Leon very differently than he had looked at anyone else on that cliff. I needed to be less myself. The problem was that 18 years of practice at disappearing, and I still hadn't figured out how to make my heart behave like iron. Maybe I never would. Chapter 4. The King's Shadow. The armory after dark was the only place in the trial compound that felt honest. No posturing, no crowd reading your face for weakness. Just iron and leather and the smell of oil and old blood worked into the stone floor over decades of sharpening and preparing for things that might kill you. I had slipped in an hour past curfew to rewrap the grip on my short blade. The binding had loosened during the traverse, and a weapon that shifts in your hand in the semifinals is a weapon that gets you killed. I worked by the low light of a single wall torch, fingers moving in the pattern I had memorized alone in the forest at 14. I did not hear him come in. That was what frightened me most. Not that he was there, not even what it meant, but that a man his size had crossed a stone floor in iron-soled boots, and I had not heard a single footstep. He moved like something that had decided sound was optional. You hold a blade like someone who taught themselves. I did not spin around. I finished the wrap, pulled the knot tight, and then turned, slowly, the way Leon would. The way someone turns when they have decided not to be afraid. He was leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed, watching me with the expression I was beginning to dread. Not hostile, not suspicious, curious. Like I was a problem he found genuinely interesting. Most people were taught by someone, I said. Most people, he agreed, and pushed off the door frame. He moved to the rack of practice blades, considered them with unhurried attention, and selected two. Held one out, hilt first, and my hand took it before my brain weighed in. I'm not looking for a sparring partner, I said. No, he said. And he attacked. Not hard, a testing strike, angled to see how I moved rather than score a hit. I parried from instinct, and for a half-second his eyes flared with something that looked like delight. We circled. He came again, faster. I slipped the angle of it the way I'd learned to slip my brother's reach. Use their momentum, don't meet it. Let size work against itself. He pulled the strike before it connected, which told me he'd seen it coming, which meant he was still testing. The spar lasted 6 minutes. Every time I opened a gap, he found a new angle that required an answer. And the thing about a body trained in secret for 3 years is that it answers before you can decide whether answering is wise. And he never once tried to hurt me. He kept the pressure exactly at the edge of my capability. Like a man calibrating an instrument he was trying to understand. When he stepped back, he was breathing slightly harder. So was I. He looked at me for a long moment in the torchlight. I held still and reminded myself that Leon would not look away first. Neither would I. You fight like someone who can't afford to lose, he said. Quiet. Almost gentle. The way truth is sometimes gentle when it comes from someone who respects you enough to say it plainly. Most people here can't, I said. He set the practice blade back on the rack and was almost to the door when he stopped, his back still to me. The ribbon was red. My blood went cold. I found it in the stream, after the forest run. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. I could hear what was in his voice, not an accusation, something quieter and far more dangerous. A man gently laying a card face up on the table and leaving so you can decide what to do about it. The door closed without a sound. I stood in the armory for a long time, staring at where he had been. My wolf was making a sound I had never heard from her. Low, continuous, somewhere between yearning and warning. He knew. He had known. And he had walked into the dark with me anyway and handed me a blade and made me show him everything I was. I didn't know what to do with a man like that. I had never needed to before. Chapter 5. Betrayal in the Ring. Byron had always been good at making cruelty look like competition. The semi-final brackets went up at dawn. My name, Leon, no pack, drawn against Byron Stoneheart in the third bout. I read it twice, folded the notice, put it in my breast pocket, and went to eat breakfast because there was nothing else to do and I needed my body to work in 2 hours. He confirmed what I feared in the first 30 seconds. The ring was stone and packed earth, open to the sky, tiered seats rising around it like the compound was cupping the violence in its hands. Byron entered and the Stoneheart brothers at the rails cheered like it was already over. He came at me fast and low, which was wrong. Byron always fought tall, used his height. Coming in low was a feint. And as I dropped back to let it pass and his arm extended, and I saw it. Silver tips on the knuckle guard, filed to barely visible points, bright as needles in the morning light. The exposure didn't need to be much. A graze was enough. Enough silver in the bloodstream to dull a wolf's instincts, slow the body's red of danger, shave the reaction time that was the only real advantage I had over men who outweighed me by 80 pounds. He caught my forearm on the second exchange, a line of fire along the inside of my wrist, and then, worse, my wolf dropped away from the surface of my skin like a tide going suddenly, completely out. The world went flat, sounds muffled, my body still mine but some essential layer of it gone. Byron smiled. Something wrong, little pup? He swung again. I didn't try to match it. Matching Byron in raw power on a good day was impossible. On silver, it was a death wish. For I let the blow travel past my ear by 2 inches, turned with the momentum, and used his own forward drive to redirect him hard into the ring wall. He hit Stone shoulder first. The crowd noise changed pitch. He came back angrier, which was what I wanted. An angry Byron was a predictable Byron, all forward momentum and punishing intention. I gave him nothing solid to land on. I moved the way I'd moved through dark forest at 3 a.m. for 3 years, trusting ground I couldn't fully see, reading space by instinct rather than calculation. Every time he committed weight, I wasn't there. The silver was doing what silver does, wearing at the edges of everything, making the world feel wrapped in cloth. But cloth is not armor. And I had learned something in 18 years of being underestimated that no amount of silver could reach. I knew how to find the gap between one breath and the next. I had been living in that gap my whole life. The end came in the 12th pass. Byron overcommitted to a right-hand strike. Just barely, just enough. And I went under it and inside his reach, and put everything left into a hip throw that took his legs out and put him down on his back with my knee at his sternum and my forearm across his throat. He stopped moving. The count finished. The official called it. I stood up. My legs were not entirely steady. Byron looked up at me from the dirt with an expression I had never seen on his face. Not quite recognition, not quite rage. Something colder. Something that meant he was done guessing. And I walked out of the ring without looking at the royal observation post. I already knew what I would find there. Gold eyes, still as stone, watching. One more fight. One more, and it would be over, one way or another. Either I would win my freedom, or I would be standing in the arena with my hood gone and no name left to hide behind. I had not let myself think, until that moment, about how terrified I was of winning. Chapter 6. The Golden Queen. The circle of embers was lit at dusk. Iron braziers ringed the final arena, their flames low and orange and very old-looking, like fire that had been burning since before the trials began and would go on burning long after. The compound had filled past capacity. The air was thick with the held breath of a crowd that knew something was about to happen and couldn't name what. My opponent was Byron, again. He came into the ring without looking at the crowd, only at me. And in his eyes I saw that he had spent the hours since the semifinal arriving at a certainty he hadn't wanted. He knew. Not everything, but enough. He had the look of a man who had decided that whatever came out of tonight, he was going to bury it. We were 40 seconds in when he stopped pretending. He fought without technique, no silver, like no strategy, just the full brute weight of 18 years of being told he was exactly what power was supposed to look like. He was trying to end it quickly, put me down before anything could be revealed, before the truth could become something that couldn't be undone. And I was so tired, not just from the silver fading from my bloodstream, tired from 3 years of dark morning training, tired from 5 days of keeping my voice low and my face flat, and my grief over everything I had left behind folded so small I could pretend it wasn't there, tired of being both Leon and Leah simultaneously, holding 2 people apart inside one body. Byron hit me in the 3rd pass, and I went down on one knee. Callahan's voice came from somewhere in the tears, a sharp, ugly sound of satisfaction, where I put my hand in the dirt and felt the cold of the packed earth and thought with strange clarity, this is the ground I was given, this specific ground, and I am still on it. I got up. Byron swung for the finish. He put everything behind it, all his height, all his reach, all his certainty. I went low and inside and used his momentum to pull him past me, pivoted, drove my shoulder up into his center and flipped him. He went over. He hit the ground with a sound like something important giving way. I pinned him, knee in the dirt, forearm on his sword arm, weight distributed the way 3 years had taught me, and my hood fell. I felt it go. The linen at my hairline giving from the impact, my gold hair spilling forward into the torchlight. The arena went silent. Byron looked up at me. His face moved through shock, then rage. Then, and this was the one I had never expected. Something that looked almost like shame. That was the expression that broke something loose in my chest, quietly, where no one could see it. I heard the crowd finding its voice, heard Callahan start to shout about disqualification, heard my father's name somewhere in the tiers, and felt the old familiar dread begin to rise. And then I heard boots on the arena stone. Not running, deliberate. The sound of someone who has made a decision and is enacting it without hurry, because nothing about the situation threatens them. He came down from the royal dais and crossed the floor, and the crowd parted the way water parts. Not because it wants to, but because there is no alternative. He stopped beside me and looked down at Byron in the dirt. And then he looked at me, as his gold eyes were warm in a way I hadn't let myself see before. I had been so busy reading them for danger that I had missed what else was there, that he had been waiting, not hunting, waiting. There is a difference, and I understood it only now, with my face finally, completely uncovered. He reached into his breast pocket and produced a small dark red ribbon, set it on my open palm with deliberate precision, closed my fingers around it. Then he turned to the crowd, and his voice carried to every tier, every corner, every wolf who had ever decided I was not worth looking at. You came here seeking a champion. You have found a queen. The silence after was the most complete thing I had ever heard. It broke first among the Omegas at the back rails. Sadie's voice, sharp and fierce and absolutely not crying, beginning to cheer. It spread upward through the tiers, the way fire spreads through dry wood. Reluctantly at first, then without stopping, Byron rose from the dirt. He looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time, and dropped to one knee. It was not graceful. It cost him something real. Callahan followed, then Remington, then Miller, then the twins, one after the other, like dominoes made of iron, finally learning what weight they'd been putting on the wrong things. I stood in the circle of embers and watched my brothers kneel and felt, not triumph, something quieter, something that had been waiting longer. I was still standing, after everything, the dismissal, the silver, the 18 years of not being seen. I was still standing, with dirt on my knees and blood on my lip, and my real name finally back in my own mouth. And that was the thing Iron had never understood about gold. You don't destroy it by pressure. You don't diminish it by heat. You only ever reveal what was always there. A note on what this story is really about. Leah Stoneheart never became powerful by learning to be more like her brothers. She won by being precisely, stubbornly, relentlessly herself. Faster where they were stronger, smarter where they were louder, kinder where they were brutal. The gift no one saw, because no one was looking for it, was not a wolf's strength. It was a human heart that refused to harden, even when hardening would have been the easier thing. If you have ever been told that your way of being in the world is a weakness, that your sensitivity, your care, your refusal to perform cruelty is a deficiency, this story was for you. You are not iron. But you were never meant to be.